The podcast category listened to longest, the latest from Podnews.net with Magellan AI, helping you build your podcast ad plan. Total downloads are one thing, but what podcast categories are listened to longest? Apple Podcasts data supplied to Podnews tells us the top 5 categories with the longest overall global listen time are at number 5, health and fitness, at number 4, true crime, at number 3, news, at number 2, comedy, and at number 1, you guessed it, society and culture. That data is for December, but is much the same for the last half of the year, with health and fitness occasionally making it to number 4. And we'd note that the categories drop-down in the charts section of the app follows this order. Swell AI claims to automate writing articles, summaries, time-stamped show notes and more for your podcasts and videos. Worth a look if it might save you some time. What does podcasting look like in 2023? Ozial Enriquez, the Director of Content Marketing at Queued Up Audio and founder of Pod Houston, thinks more podcasters will turn their shows into live events and will see more representation for all voices. We'll link to his article from our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. And here's a stat for you. There are 2.5 million feeds in the podcast index with less than 2 episodes. In People News, Matt Medeiros has written that due to downsizing, he left Castos last week. He was Director of Podcaster Success for the podcast hosting company and tells us what he's good at in a YouTube video that we'll link to today. If there are any podcast companies hiring, he says, I'd love to chat. We have a section in our newsletter that goes out every day called Tips and Tricks. Doesn't normally make it into the podcast, but today it's going to. We link to how much money I earned as a YouTuber in 2022. It's from Ali Abdal, and it outlines how he earned revenue from his YouTube videos and how much. His total revenue for 2022 was $4.6 million. Mind you, his costs were $2.5 million, and he's been doing this since 2017. Fathom.fm is the AI podcast player from the future. On Fathom, podcast fans enjoy a next-generation podcast listening experience with captions and transcripts and chapters, and even the ability to create custom clips for saving and sharing their favourite moments. What's more, Fathom allows listeners to search inside podcasts, surfacing hidden moments ready to like, save and share. If you're a podcast creator, you can claim your podcast and start your viral adventure. You can check out Fathom's revolutionary new podcast experience today. You'll find out more at fathom.fm, and we thank them for their support today. And in podcast news, the Chris Stigall Show has joined the Salem Podcast Network, or perhaps it's Stigal. Anyway, he claims 4 million downloads. The Projection Booth podcast is celebrating its 12th anniversary this year. Mike White, the host, tells us it's the only independently produced podcast that consistently places in the top 20 of Apple Podcasts' film history chart. It's on Spreaker. The weekly news show Can We Please Talk has new episodes this week at their new home of Agua Media. With award-winning guests, the next few shows promise to focus on former President Donald Trump and Congressman George Santos. Apple Music has launched The Message with Ebro Darden, a series that aims to further the dialogue about the unrest and inequalities in the United States and abroad via intimate conversations with some of the most prominent voices in the culture today. It's one of 5 shows in the Apple Music channel, driven by the company's radio station Beats One. And the 4th and final season of Threatened from BirdNote launches today, taking us to Puerto Rico. We're promised good news about the Puerto Rican parrot, a bird that, in spite of deforestation, hurricanes and the exotic pet trade, is full of life. His metabolic processes are abundant. He hasn't kicked the bucket. He is yet to shuffle off his mortal coil, touch any form of curtain, or join any form of choir, whether visible or invisible. We learn the difficult trade-offs that were involved to make sure that he isn't an ex-parrot. This podcast is sponsored by Magellan AI. It must be very proud. Every month, Magellan AI works out the top spenders in podcasting, as well as those making big moves in their podcast ad budget. Who'll be December's top advertisers? You will be the first to find out tomorrow in their free webinar. You should register now by following the link you'll find at podnews.net/latest. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.